Today on The State of Us, Musk says Twitter deal is on hold, and the end of Roe, and the victims of the Buffalo shooting. What in the world is going on? Welcome to The State of Us. I'm your host, Justin T. Weller, joined, of course, today by the one and only, the friendly redneck liberal and senior resident historian here at True Chat, Mr. Lance L. Jackson. Today, we're looking at a host of topics from the shooting in Buffalo, New York, to Elon Musk's Twitter deal, and the potential end of Roe from the standpoint of someone who is pro-choice, but anti-Roe. And that might sound counterintuitive, but we're going to dive into all of it and really take a look here. But before we do, Lance, do we have a word of the day?
We do. All of this chaos, the word of the day is incertitude. It is a noun, 4 syllables, incertitude, meaning an uncertain state of mind or doubt, or an uncertain state of affairs. Incertitude. Incertitude.
We'll try to keep that one in mind as we get started with Elon Musk saying that the deal to acquire Twitter is on hold. So some of you may have heard that Elon Musk had planned an acquisition of Twitter, but has now said it is temporarily on hold because of concerns about fake accounts, a surprise twist that jolted investors and raised questions about his willingness to go through with the $44 billion transaction. Mr. Musk's grenade came in a tweet posted at 5:44 a.m. Eastern Time, according to the Wall Street Journal, that was followed just over 2 hours later by another saying he was, quote, still committed to acquisition. Lawyers close to Mr. Musk urged him to send that follow-up tweet, according to people familiar with the matter.
Well, I have no incertitude about Elon Musk's desire to be in the news.
No?
No, he very much likes to see his name being spoken and in print, because he's always sticking his nose and making comments about something and doing something. I think whether he actually does something or follows through on it, it's kind of like you either like Elon Musk and his maverick attitude, or you don't like him at all because of the fact that he's just trying to upset the apple cart for the sake of upsetting the apple cart.
So what do you make of this whole potential acquisition, though? I mean, right, there's a lot of people on both sides. You've got some that are saying, oh, this will be tremendous for free speech. There's never been anything greater in the history of all human history for the rights of free speech everywhere than Elon Musk swooping in and saving the day and eliminating the cruel and unfair censorship of the political right and those who have outside opinions on Twitter. Of course, then you have the other side that says basically the exact opposite is, this is the worst thing ever. We're going to let fake news spread everywhere because Elon Musk doesn't care. And, he wants that disinformation out there and it'll just corrupt everybody. Twitter is going to go and become even worse than it already is. How is that even possible? So you got a lot of a wide variety of extreme viewpoints. What do you think, Lance? I mean, is this the greatest victory for free speech in all eternity, or is it the worst affront to disinformation and fake news that has ever taken place?
No.
Okay. It's neither of those.
It's neither of one.
You mean that the world doesn't hang on Elon Musk's every whim?
It's never the best or the worst it's ever been. I just don't fit into either one of those polls. My question, and it's kind of to the point of where Mr. Musk has thrown a monkey wrench into the deal, he's questioning, well, how many people are even on Twitter? And that would be my question to you. As someone, do I have a Twitter account? Yes, my daughters created it years ago for me. When's the last time I posted? I would probably say 7 or 8 years ago. So I am not a Twitter user or a Twitter follower. Is it really something that's being done? I mean, is it that widespread?
Probably the most accurate way to measure is in the last quarter, the number of global monetizable daily active users.
Okay.
So try saying that fast. The monetizable daily active users, or MDAU, on Twitter amounted to 299 million users.
So that's not a very big number, right? Of people that are even using Twitter?
Correct.
As far as,
percentage-wise,
is it really going to be earth-shattering either way? To my initial comment when you asked me the question, is it really going to change things when you have such a small percentage of people who actually use the product? I mean, is it a lot of people as far as a number is concerned? Yes, but how many people are really going to be affected one way or the other by it, because not that many people are using it.
Well, by comparison, just to gauge, where Twitter's standing is, Facebook in the first quarter of 2022 had roughly 2.93 billion monthly active users. So, I mean, 3 billion of the 7.8 billion in the world, that's a pretty big proportion, but 230 million of the 7.8 billion is not a very large percentage.
So is Elon Musk just trying to get people interested in Twitter again? And so he's just doing things to raise the awareness of Twitter because it's really not that big of a deal and he can't make that much money unless he makes it a big deal?
The other thing is, and like, not to disparage Elon Musk, because I don't have that kind of money. So there's a success component to it, which we've talked about. There's a smarts component. There's also a luck component to wealth like that as well. The right place, the right time, with the right intellect and the right business, But all of that said, I think there's also this side of, it's not a secret that Elon Musk has had an axe to grind with Twitter before, multiple times in the past. And when you have this kind of money, hey, if I can make money and buy a business that
I'll just buy it and either make it what I want it or trash it.
Yeah.
And then it doesn't have to be out there to make me mad.
That's pretty expensive if you're going to trash it. I mean, $44 billion seems a steep price just to get rid of, somebody that you don't like. But again, if you're one of the wealthiest people in the world of all time, I suppose you can, what else are you going to spend it on, right? So might as well spend it on that. That's right.
And hey, Elon, if you're listening, which I'm sure you're probably, we'll hear about this. Feel free to join us sometime. We'll give you give you 5 or 10 minutes of your time if you want to explain your side of it. But it sounds to me like you're just being pretty much a big blowhard who doesn't like something and you're just going to buy it out and squish it and you're just going to show everybody who's boss. And so it doesn't sound to me like there are really that many people on Twitter and it doesn't really make that big a deal. You're the only person making it a big deal.
Yeah, I think, his defense, would be that he's doing this in the name of free speech because Twitter's crackdown in recent, and of course, this has been something we've talked about across social media, that balance of, how responsible is social media for cracking down on disinformation, hate speech, that type of stuff versus how responsible are they to freedom of speech, of course, where we've come down. And it's kind of surprising that Elon is not of the same opinion, seeing as he's very strong, private enterprise, is that at the moment, these are all, private company entities. And if they don't want you to say something, it doesn't really matter what it is, they can restrict it because you don't have to use their service. We've also talked about, though, in recent years that maybe we should be viewing them differently and be viewing them more through the lens of a public utility and less the lens of, private enterprise that just should be allowed to do whatever it wants. Because as we know, so many people do get their news from Facebook, from Twitter, from online social media, that to simply say that it has no impact, on news consumption or opinions, obviously is not true.
Well, I think putting these devices in people's hands has given them a misnomer of what free speech is. The Constitution, the right to free speech, doesn't mean you can say whatever you want anytime you want. That's not what free speech means. That's not what the Constitution.
You mean I can't yell fire in a movie theater, Lance?
In a crowded
or
movie
bomb
theater
on a plane?
Right, when there's not one. You can't do those things. There have been
Why not?
Because the
free
Supreme
speech,
Court,
baby.
That's not what free speech means. And again, there's where people don't understand. Some people don't understand what free speech means because the Supreme Court has ruled on and given parameters to what is meant by free speech. And it doesn't mean that you can say whatever you want, whenever you want, to whomever you want.
Do you like the idea of just the concept of, forget the constitutional argument, Musk, takes over Twitter and the shackles are off, right? Free speech, uninhibited. Say whatever you want. And I'm not saying he's advocating that because I think he believes in some degree of restraint, but obviously be a lot more open-ended than it is currently. Is that something that Lance wants to see?
No.
Okay. Keep the crazies reined in.
You're having people use this to say things that they know aren't true to try to control other people or to get other people to do their work for them. That's the whole point of what is not free speech. Now, you're pushing me because the other side of me says, and here's where I have some incertitude, and that is that we should all be free to make our own decisions. And that means we should be able to disseminate the information that's out there, the opinions that people have, and we can decide what we agree with and don't agree with. But we've never, because we've done this before on the show. This is not a new thing. It's just that you've never had access to this many people at one time that you have with Twitter and Facebook. We've talked about, we've done shows on books that have been written by historians that show that newspapers were slanted from the time before we became the United States of America. We were British colonies. And so there never really has been, press that presented the news like we think the press ought to. MSNBC and Fox and CNN aren't new. They are following a tradition of slanted news coverage that has been involved in the United States since colonial times. Is it okay for anybody anywhere to say anything they want, no matter what the repercussions are, and leave it up to everybody else to decide? I honestly think that way, but I don't think that's what's best for our nation, because there are too many people out there that take these slanted things as fact and then make decisions or take action on them that then brings us down as a nation.
Well, Jim Jordan seems to be happy about Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. So, as I'm sure our listeners are very concerned about Representative Jordan's feelings
so that
on
means
the
I
issue.
can chastise Jim Jordan all I want, and Jim Jordan says that's all right because I have free speech.
That's right.
I can make up anything I want about him. It doesn't have to be true because I have free speech. Doesn't sound like the type of country that I want to live in.
Okay.
I would want people to have to be able to support what they have to say with facts, not just their opinions.
So speaking of facts and not opinions, and also understanding the law of the land, let's talk about the end of Roe v. Wade and how a constitutional scholar who is pro-life but anti-Roe could possibly exist. To find out, keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. For a constitutional scholar and pro-choice Democrat, there are reasons to endorse the leaked draft opinion overturning the 1973 abortion decision, and to see it as a vindication for a range of liberal priorities. Sounds like an interesting subtitle. Sounds like a bit of a conundrum, but this author certainly does not express any degree of or any lack of, I guess I should say, certitude. His convictions are strong in his arguments, and whether or not you like them, we hinted at this a little bit when we talked about the possibility of this when the draft came out, and I think it's important that we revisit it, which is, and this is what this is primarily about, the legality of Roe v. Wade, right? How sound is the reasoning, and is that really what you want abortion defined on? And that's not a rhetorical question, folks. I am genuinely asking, and the point of this article, obviously, it is an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal, so it is arguing a particular viewpoint. But I think that's how we should be thinking about this as we talk. Let's take a look at what he's got to say here. And this is just a few excerpts. It's linked at thestateofus.org, so we strongly recommend that you take a look at it, read the full thing, as there is a lot of different stuff, because it addresses a few points, including things like how could this affect other rights. Nor is there anything unusual in the leaked draft's treatment of Precedent, Supreme Court precedents strictly bind lower courts, but they do not bind the Supreme Court itself. Indeed, an essential function of the court is to revise incorrect or outdated prior rulings. Over the last century, listen to this statistic. This is, I certainly would not have guessed it was this common. Over the last century, the court has overruled itself about twice a year, roughly the same rate at which the court has overturned acts of Congress. So, in other words, overruling existing court, the Supreme Court overruling things the court has said or overruling Congress is not uncommon. It is, in fact, actually fairly common.
Well, I guess, again, to the people out there that weren't paying attention when they sat in social studies class or government class in high school, okay, yes. I mean, that's not the issue here, right? I mean, I understand what they're saying, and what they're saying is exactly correct, but people are saying we don't want them to overturn themselves this time. I mean, the country is split on whether or not they should overturn themselves. Is anybody out there arguing that they don't have the right to do this?
No,
I'm not listening even to the people who don't want it overturned. They're not saying, well, the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to do this. That's not the argument. So,
right.
Not to, whitewash the rest of the article, but it's like, okay, dude, but nobody's claiming that the Supreme Court doesn't have the right to do this. This is why the Supreme Court exists, is to do these very things.
Yeah, I think what people are getting upset about is, there's a precedent and you can't just go around overturning
Well, yeah, but you
precedent.
can. That's my point. You didn't pay attention in government class in high school.
Wow,
because that's
what a lot of people didn't.
That's one of the, that's like a week or two's study of the Supreme Court. It says the Supreme Court has the right to do what you just said, Justin. I mean, it's like, okay, people, sorry you didn't pay attention in civics class, but this is not the argument to take. If your argument is, well, they can't do this. Yes, they can. And they do it all the time. It's just, it's never been on an issue like this in your lifetime. Okay. Put that little phrase in there because people are like, well, this has never been done before. No, since you've been born and since, oh, wait a minute, nothing happened before you were born and nothing will happen after you die because it's all about you, right? And unfortunately, that's the society we live in. But if you study history, what the Supreme Court is doing is not outlandish nor unprecedented, okay? And I hate it when the news media uses those kind of words. Oh, this has never happened before.
It's unprecedented.
Yes, it's unprecedented. Oh my gosh.
Because unprecedented would mean that it's never happened before, right?
That we'll have to use that as a word of the day, I guess, so we can educate people. But,
okay.
And just because it hasn't happened in your lifetime doesn't mean that it's never happened. And just because you don't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I get frustrated in today's society because I seem to read that more. Well, I didn't know. Okay, not my fault that you didn't know. But yeah, it does exist.
In returning to the article, today, the Supreme Court's 1973 opinion in Roe v. Wade, written by Justice Harry Blackmun, is similarly ripe for reversal. In the eyes of many constitutional experts across the ideological spectrum, it, too, lacks solid grounding in the Constitution itself. As Justice Alito demonstrates at length in his leaked Dobbs draft, full disclosure, the draft cites me and several others as constitutional scholars who oppose Roe but personally support abortion rights. Even the late Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg was sharply critical of the decision. Justice Alito has never said anything remotely similar about Roe. For traditionalists, there is an essential difference between the contraception and abortion cases. Whereas the court in Griswold sided with 49 states against the outlier Connecticut, the court in Roe invalidated the laws of at least 49, perhaps all 50 states. The Dobbs draft takes pains to cite this stunning fact. Part of the point he illustrates here in length, which we're not going to cite every example, but in most of the landmark rulings where the court overruled itself, it was actually in favor of a majority of states who had already taken similar action, and the court was merely laying the law of the land. When Roe v. Wade was handed down, it was one of the only examples, if not the only example in Supreme Court history where they were going against laws that were actively on the books in not just the vast majority of states, but nearly every single state at the time.
Which shows why there was such an uproar when the decision was made.
Sure. And continuing on with that notion of why has it been contentious for the last 50 or 60 years, right? Well, partly because there were many, many states at the time and many people in those states who were like, what the heck? Why is this happening?
But the counter here is that that's why we have a Supreme Court, you would argue, is they are supposed to do what needs to be done in the face of what's popular to be done. See, that's the other reason you can make an argument that the Supreme Court exists as a branch of government. It was established to take a look at things and say, okay, you guys are all saying this, but that's not right. We're not going to let you get away with it. Per se, go back to Andrew Jackson, right? The courts and the states all said that they had the right to move the Indians off of the land that the Indians had bought themselves and were raising cotton on in Georgia. And the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Indians. Even though it wasn't the popular decision, it wasn't what was followed by state law, the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Indians and said they get to stay on their land. And Andrew Jackson took the U.S. military and moved the Indians westward and put them on reservations in Oklahoma on a long march that was called the Trail of Tears because of the number of Indians who died on the forced march. So Jackson went against the Constitution. The Constitution went against state law. And you say, well, why does Jackson get to stay as president? Well, because Congress agreed with Jackson. And so 2/3, 2 out of 3, since Congress has to impeach the president violated law, violated the Constitution, violated the Supreme Court decision, and still got to stay president. And the Indians who won their case in court lost their land.
And he addresses this by saying tradition and state counting are sound ways of thinking about unenumerated American liberties, but rights that are explicitly mentioned in the Constitution, such as the rights of racial and gender equality, warrant stricter judicial protection, even when such rights contradict dominant customs. The Dobbs draft says too little about sex and gender equality. Advocates for reproductive rights also slighted issues of equality in their oral argument in Dobbs, recapitulating one of the biggest flaws of the Roe opinion itself. Later drafts of Justice Alito's opinion will likely need to take equality issues more seriously as the dissonance of the court's liberals begin to circulate, no doubt highlighting and criticizing this major lapse. He also explains consider another landmark Warren Court case that the Dobbs draft cites with implicit approval, Loving versus Virginia, which struck down laws against interracial marriage. The court's opinion expressly noted that by 1967, the year the case came down, more than 2/3 of states allowed interracial marriage. Many of the rest allowed interracial couples to marry elsewhere and then return home as lawful spouses. Today, interracial marriage is even more firmly established as a bedrock feature of American life. The ruling in Roe v. Wade, by contrast, has been under fierce and relentless attack for decades in most states. It has been unremittingly condemned in the, this guy really likes the big words here, Lance, quadrennial party platforms of one of America's two major parties, a party that has won half of the presidential elections since Roe. Roe is also decisively different from various contraceptive and marriage cases because, as Justice Alito's draft opinion stresses, abortion uniquely involves destroying unborn human life, typically long after contraception and implantation. One of the other areas that is addressed, Lance, in this, which is one that we talked about, is what does this mean, right, for other things like contraceptive cases or LGBTQ rights? And the author contends, perhaps surprisingly, the draft's logic also buttresses certain important LGBT rights. As the court emphasized in its landmark ruling in Lawrence v. Texas, which invalidated anti-sodomy laws such as the laws that were almost never enforced in America against private consensual conduct, but rather only in cases of rape or public indecency. Justice Anthony Kennedy's majority opinion reported that only 13 states at this time still had laws prohibiting consensual adult sodomy, and only 4 states signaled out same-sex sodomy. Even in these outlier states, there was a, quote, pattern of non-enforcement with respect to adults acting in private. Justice Kennedy's later landmark opinion for the court, Obergefell versus Hodges, 2015, which required all states to recognize same-sex marriage, raises a rather different issue. The Dobbs draft does not directly challenge Obergefell and purports to limit its own thrust to abortion cases. But the draft's logic could be seen to undermine the Obergefell decision, which was issued over the dissents of Justice Alito and other conservative justices, who argued that same-sex marriage was not deeply rooted in American tradition. The status of same-sex marriage is obviously changing, however, and such unions are fast becoming a pillar of modern American life. Every year, same-sex marriage, unlike abortion, becomes more widespread and accepted, more deeply rooted, and less controversial. And crucially, Obergefell is at a heart of gender equality case. Traditional marriage laws discriminated on the basis of sexual orientation, allowing straight people but not gay people to pursue marital happiness. These laws also discriminated on the basis of sex. Patrick was allowed to marry Mary, but Patricia was not. And so the argument then continued on what I had mentioned before about arguing that those are specific rights enumerated in the Constitution. And so goes the argument here by this gentleman that abortion is not an enumerated right in the Constitution and is one of those unenumerated rights that has been argued under different grounds, and that the Roe opinion is not only arguing weakly on the constitutional basis, but is also arguing an unenumerated right, which is part of why this whole situation comes up.
Free speech, right? He has the right to his opinion.
He does.
But the big question is, how does this affect people in their everyday lives? And that's still to be seen, I guess, would be my retort to all. Okay, so he cites the laws, and these, and again, just like Justice Alito's written document is an opinion, this gentleman has written an opinion. And so this is the way he's interpreting what has taken place and what could happen as a result of that.
And a reminder to our folks that, again, as Lance pointed out, most people are not arguing that the Supreme Court can't do this, but they are one of three branches of government. If you don't like what they're doing, despite the fact they have the right to do it, there are other remedies. And let us not forget that, right? The court is not the only body politic that has the ability to do something about this. Do not let your representatives, regardless of where you come down on the issue, don't let your representatives abdicate their responsibility and say, well, there's nothing we can do. Well, no, they're lazy and they're not doing what they have the power to do. So don't let them get away with that. You can be mad at the Supreme Court if you want, but you should be equally, if not more, frustrated with your legislature. Let's talk about the Buffalo mass shooting. Keep it here on The State of Us, and we'll be right back. There was a mass shooting last Saturday at a Tops supermarket in Buffalo, New York, where 10 people were killed in an attack that targeted black residents. Front page of the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, May 17th. They've got pictures of the victims there, an FBI investigator looking at the bullet holes. What do you make of this, Lance? I mean, we talked about, we think it probably merits a full show, but I feel like we've talked around this 10 different ways. We're living in a time, right, where people still feel that the way to address their issues is by taking others' lives.
It is, and it's an atrocity. But again, you get into, if you're going to argue free speech, right? This person has gone out there and it seems like with the police, they've found multiple writings and opinions of this person and what they've put out there, and that they were going to do it. And you say, well, free speech, they have the right to do that. And now they've acted on it. So now where do you come down on free speech? Obviously, in my opinion, this person is demented, and there's something wrong. But unfortunately, in today's society, they're not alone. There are many people who feel this way on both sides of the issue. And this is just wrong. I mean, it's scary to live in a place where there's this much hate. And that's one take on it. The other side, and we were talking about this before the show, and that is, this is also not outside the norm. This has happened before. Again, we have media coverage now. You find out things like this. It seems to be in some human DNA to take actions like this. Like, I'm going to blame others for my problems. We all have problems, okay? And fortunately, most of us roll our sleeves up and face our problems and go to work and try to fix our problems. But there are people who then just say, you know what? I'm not strong enough, in my opinion. They say, well, I'm not strong enough to fix my own problems, so I'm going to take out all my frustrations and concerns on the people that are causing me the problem, and I'm just going to get rid of them. The Nazi Holocaust being one of the most common known in the history of the world. Now, there have been other Holocausts. There was, killings all over the place that we could talk about. People say, well, I never heard of them. I didn't know that existed. Okay, well, again, just because you didn't know about it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. But that's what people did. It's like, oh, my life's horrible, and it's the Jews' fault, and it's the Slavs' fault, and it's the Polish fault, and it's all these people's fault. And Hitler said, yeah, it's not your fault that you're messed up and screwed up, and you're in debt, and the National Bank is bankrupt, and we're in a Great Depression. And yeah, it's not your fault. It's everybody else's fault. So we're just going to round up all these people that it's their fault. They're the ones who did this to us, and we're just going to kill them. And people said, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And the world looked the other way and said, well, that's just the way things go. And here we are again, okay? People are having problems. People are struggling. Well, it's everybody else's fault but my fault. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to take out those people that are causing me problems. And not even straight to it. I'm just going to find a total group of people and blame them, and then drive 3 or 4 hours from my home and just take out those people in that group, even though those people that I just shot and killed had nothing to do with my life. They're just like the people, air quotes there, that are causing me not the ability to be successful in the world. And what are we doing to stop it, folks? What are we doing to address it? It's just happening over and over and over again. Okay? And if you watch the news like we do, every week there's 1 or 2 of these types of shootings, whether it's at a synagogue or a school or a grocery store or on the highway or where, at a dance club. It just happens repeatedly. It's not going away. What's the systemic cause of this? That's where we need to get to. Or is it something that the systemic cause is, it's human nature? Because as you study history of the world, it's always happened. The Jewish people didn't like the fact that Jesus Christ walked on the face of the earth and said, no, we got to kill somebody because he's talking about peace. And the Romans said, yeah, we got to get rid of him because, we can't be kind to one another. We can't have charity and love one another and help each other out. And anybody who's 33 years old and speaks that kind of language is dangerous to those of us in power. So we got to take them out.
The Romans and the Jews that were in power were most threatened by this, because you can't have somebody that advocates we all get along. What have we talked about before? I think I have expressed my certitude in regard to our division as a nation benefits who? Political parties, i.e. the people in power, right? Division benefits them, because if there's not an enemy, then do we really need somebody who has all this power?
Well, and we had a political leader who gave the people who are doing these kinds of things, gave them a voice. And so now they're out there and they're doing it. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised, right? I can be appalled. I can hate what happened. I can wish it wouldn't happen. But can I really sit here and say, well, I'm surprised it's going on?
The point you've made before, though, right, that I think is worth reiterating to people is that it also proves that it wasn't gone. Yes, certainly you could contend that, leadership enabled it to take place because it wasn't condemned. It became acceptable to say it again. But obviously there were a lot of people that felt this way. Or the counter to that could be they didn't know how they felt and they were looking for something to place it on. As we've talked about in the past, it's happened in different countries all over the world, not just the United States. When times are hard or people are down and out, they look for what's to blame for it. Is it their fault or somebody else's? And historically, political figures love to choose simple things to blame, right? Things that are easy to understand. It is easy to understand that immigrants are the root of all your problems, that black people getting rights has eroded American society, right? Those are easy things to sell people, even if they're totally false, even if there is no basis in reality or fact. We have politicians that spew those refrains or allow others to spew those refrains without refuting them because they're easy to sow dissent over.
They talk about the problems. They talk around the problems. But I grew up, all right, with my grandfathers and my grandmothers. If they faced a problem, they rolled up their sleeve and they went to work to try to solve it. Some they did, some they didn't. But they didn't back away from the work. And I'm sick and tired of people talking about what the problems are and nobody rolling up their sleeves and digging in and solving the problem and getting to work to solve the problem.
It is common sense to take a method and try it. If it fails, admit it frankly and try another. But above all, try something. FDR. So Lance, why do we have this conversation today? What are we trying to accomplish? Our certitude is unquestionable in regard to our pursuit of a mission, is it not?
It is. True Chat's mission is to educate people by providing honest, open, and respectful conversations. And hopefully you've enjoyed today's show and it's made you think, and you can have discussions with others, and you'll roll up your sleeves and try to get something done. And if you like the show and you want to hear more, we're out on a podcast on Spotify, Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcast, and everywhere podcasts are found.
The State of Us is available Tuesdays and Thursdays, first thing in the morning as a podcast. We're heard on the weekends on AM and FM radio stations across the United States. Lance, do you have a final tally for us here on certitude?
On a technicality, I think I win because you continue to use the word certitude. And the word is incertitude.
Incertitude?
Yes. You talked about your certitude in that you are strong in your feelings, but the word of the day was incertitude, meaning an uncertain state of mind or doubt. So did you use certitude more than I did? Yes, but it was not the word of the day. So I think I win. I have 3-1 on incertitude. But I'm glad you had certitude in your use of the word. It just wasn't the word of the day. So that is my take. Bradley will have to be the umpire, the referee, and
he'll need to go back
on that.
And
yes,
create some certitude on the direction of the word of the day and make sure that Lance pronounced the word of the day correctly.
I think I spelled it too and said four syllables.
Well, that's why I couldn't get it.
Certitude is 3 syllables, right?
Yeah. See,
and I said it was a 4-syllable.
Exceeds the limit.
That's why I knew I had a chance to win because it was
too many
syllables for Justin. He couldn't get the IN in there. But it was good that you were strong in your beliefs all day. You were strong in your beliefs all day.
I was getting the word used, it just wasn't the right word. It's like the old guy. I made a list so I wouldn't forget, but I can't remember where the list
Can't
is.
Find the list.
For the State of Us, I'm Justin T. Weller.
I'm Lance Jackson.
Special thanks to producer Bradley Butch. Thank you all, our audience, for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Be the change. Be sure to check out our website, thestateofus.org, for books, articles, and all the ways to tune in. thestateofus.org.